So at the time of this video, the world is currently in a state of unrest. I dearly hope anyone watching this video is fit and healthy and hopefully not particularly financially compromised. But I know for many of us, myself included, this isn't the case. I work in the music sector, I'm a musician and I also work in a music venue, and my income has essentially been halved as a result of this. I'm in a position of financial insecurity. And for this reason, far ahead of schedule, I've actually created a Patreon for us to collectively fund the continued development of CPT. And so yeah, many of us are feeling very anxious right now. We're uncertain about what the future holds. But something very interesting occurs within the cognitive stack when we're put in this position of disruption, when we're suddenly uncertain, when we're taken outside of our routines, out of our comfortable predictions of what's going to happen the next day. And this is where the cognitive magnetism towards the dominant stack, that natural pull towards your central functions within the ego complex, actually subsides a little. And suddenly we find our cognitive stacks in a state of equilibrium, whereby an equal amount of dialogue seems to be occurring between all the functions. Extroverts are becoming more introspective. Introverts are becoming more interested in the tangible external world. And for both extroverted and introverted types and everything in between, suddenly the dialogue and interaction with for extended periods of time, that opposing side of the mind, that opposing side of our day-to-day existence, suddenly becomes far less exhausting. And yes, I am beginning to paint somewhat of a silver lining to this quarantine many of us find ourselves in. But this is not to detract from the overall negativity of the situation. I'm in no way, shape or form saying what is happening at the moment is a good thing for anybody. But what I am saying is many of us have the ability to make the best of the situation we are in. For myself, I'm being a lot more creative. I'm spending a lot more time invested in the external world. I'm doing more music for my music channel. I'm developing CPT further. This week that this video has been uploaded, I've been developing the Patreon. And maybe many of you will be able to support the continued development of CPT. Maybe you won't. Either way, I'm sure I'll find a way to continue keeping a roof above my head. Do I know this? No, not at all. But I'm trying to respond to the situation in the most positive way that I can. And with that in mind, I thought it would be appropriate to make a video on the development of the opposing stack, the activation of our oppositional function in response to this kind of disruption we are currently experiencing as a world. And as many of you know, each of these 16 personality types, cognitive types if you will, can be separated into 8 categories based upon their dominant function and opposing function. So first up, let's take the extroverted sensing dominance, the ESFP and the ESTP. These two types have an oppositional introverted intuition. So oftentimes this is subdued. So oftentimes this is much more of an authority pushing them forward and not necessarily something they actively question. Therefore, formulating their own visions of the future and their own general frameworks, holistic understanding of how the world works isn't necessarily going to be on the top of their priorities. However, in the face of the disruption we're currently experiencing right now, so many of us in quarantine, this can be a time for reflection. This can be a time whereby the types are no longer distracted by the here and now of their dominant stack and actually have the time and energy that is necessary in order to really take their future into their own hands to say, what is meaningful to me? What is my understanding of life? This holistic understanding of humanity that I currently hold dear, this future vision of myself that I'm striving towards, is this still meaningful to me? I'm going to have a dialogue with this function, with my introverted intuition, and use the time that is now available to me to decide whether or not these things are still true, whether or not they still resonate with the core of who I am. What is my future? Where am I going? What are the steps necessary in order to achieve this goal? The ESTP can use this time to broaden their understanding of how reality operates. The ESFP can use this time to decide exactly how they're going to become the person they want to be. And vice versa, because the thing is, codex rotate. The ESTP can activate their introvert feeling from their introverted intuition, and the ESFP can activate their introvert thinking from their introverted intuition. And so it's imperative that ESTPs and ESFPs use this time to reflect, to internalize. And this is quite a contrast with the INTJ and INFJ, the introverted intuition dominance, because these two types have extrovert sensing as their oppositional function. And as such, in the face of this disruption, in the relative equilibrium the cognitive stack may now be residing within, It is very much time for these two types to come out of their head. They're no longer distracted by that magnetic pull towards the formulation of visions and new modes of understanding. No, now extrovert sensing has got a far greater magnetism, and therefore the types can actually realize their visions in external reality. They can spend much more time, hours upon hours every day, manifesting their ideas and values in the external world at a rate and intensity they would have otherwise previously found timing. This is very much true for myself as an INFJ. I'm putting hours upon hours now into work, and at the end of the day, I'm feeling refreshed. This would not have occurred previous to this disruption, because now I've been taken out of my everyday employment of my introspective primary utility and can now comfortably spend time using my ultra intense extroverted sensing to focus onto the projects I need to work on and put the amount of time and energy that is necessary into them, sufficient to realize my formulations of the future. And with this subsidence of the magnetic pull of my dominant function, I can now employ both extroverted feeling and extroverted thinking through my extroverted sensing in order to actualize my introverted intuitive concoctions in external reality. And whereas introverted intuitive dominance may so often times, absent this disruption, be constantly distracted by the possibilities within their own internal world, extroverted intuitive dominance may be distracted by the possibilities and novelties of the external world. But with this disruption, with this state of equilibrium, the introverted sensing oppositional extroverted intuitive dominance, such as ENTP and the ENFP, is suddenly in a position to consult their previous experiences, to consult the concrete information within their brain, in order to reflect upon both introverted feeling and introverted thinking substrates, no longer just perceiving the internal concrete as this authority that must be obeyed, but rather actively questioning. ENTP is actively questioning what they've previously considered to be logical. ENFPs actually questioning their own personal needs, their own personal values, what they believe to be good and right. And of course, vice versa. It's a time for ENFPs to be specific with their internal logic. It's a time for ENTPs to be specific with their values, with their identity. And as such, while I do advocate introverted intuitive dominance and introverts as a whole to spend this time externally to realize your visions and your values in the external world, it's very much a time for the extrovert, particularly this extroverted intuitive dominant type, to reflect upon the minute details of who you are and what you consider to be logical according to your own introvert thinking frameworks. I'm sure you have 1,000 projects lined up. I'm sure you see this as an opportunity to work on some of these projects. And in this quarantine many of us are faced with, it's important not to take too much on. It's important not to get carried away with all of the things you might be able to do after the quarantine. Rather, it might be more important to reflect upon your introverted side and how this disruption has caused this kind of equilibrium within your stack. It is a perfect opportunity to consult who you are. What do I consider right? What do I consider logical? And after doing this, you may very well be able to pursue all of your various projects with far greater focus and integrity than you perhaps could have before. But my advice for the ISFJ and ISTJ would be the complete opposite. Yes, you may very well enjoy this time you have to reflect more upon your very specific introverted circuits. Yes, you may very well feel a level of detachment from all of these things happening around you, but just as well, this disruption that you may very well have been faced with will have effectively subsided your magnetic pull towards this introverted ultra-specificity. And as such, it is now an opportunity for you to interact with the extroverted intuitive external world in a way you may not necessarily have done before. It is time not just to observe this plethoric external reality, but rather actually take charge of your perception, actually begin to exert influence into this creative, extroverted, intuitive world, at the behest of what you find logical, at the behest of what you find meaningful. Let your extroverted intuition run wild, and I get it. Many of you will be in quarantine. Taking up an extreme sport, going on holiday to this exotic location, it's probably off the table right now. And so I'd say shift this abstract gaze of yours into the creative world. It could be virtual, it could be a canvas, something that you can do within your own home. But it is time for you to be creative. It is time for you to acquire new perspectives, new experiences. And then when normality finally returns, you'll have so much more to reflect on. You'll have so much more to consolidate and understand in a specific manner. It is to the introvert sensing dominance, the ISFJ and the ISTJ, and indeed everything in between, that I say resist the pull of normality. Use this opportunity to engage creatively with the external world. And now let's take the extroverted thinking dominance, the project-oriented individuals. With this disruption we're experiencing as a world, it's very likely your cognitive stack will be in a greater state of equilibrium, sufficient as for you to be able to reflect upon what is meaningful to you. Activate your introverted feeling in a convergent manner. Learn to tolerate and adapt to that which does not go your own way. Learn to emotionally adapt and relate to entirely new, innovative ways of accomplishing your goals. The quarantine so many of us are currently faced with is a perfect opportunity for extroverted thinking dominance to reflect upon what is personally meaningful to them. Is this project on my to-do list still meaningful to me? Is it still congruent to my identity? Are all of these various domains of extroverted thinking that I am currently responsible for, be them organizations or otherwise, still congruent to who I am as a person? In what ways have I changed? In what ways do I want to change? It is the perfect time for this kind of introverted feeling reflection. And on the topic of introverted feeling, let's look at the introverted feeling dominance, types which so often form idealistic visions of how they want things to go, but don't necessarily have the energy or the focus or necessarily even the drive to realize these goals in reality, particularly not without the help of others. And so oftentimes these types will let go of their ideals, let go of their visions in order to help another person realize theirs, especially when they see that other person as an extension of who they are in the first place. And with extroverted thinking occupying, as it so often does, an oppositional divergent role within this cognitive stack, it is no surprise that INFPs, ISFPs often prefer to follow guidelines, follow another person's instructions, rather than use their extroverted thinking in a convergent manner sufficient as to find their own way of doing things. However, when one's life is disrupted, particularly in the case of a quarantine that so many of us are faced with, that pull towards that kind of introverted feeling idealism suddenly subsides a little, sufficiently as to allow for the convergent employment of extroverted thinking. This is not a time for introverted feelers to form visions of a future according to what they would prefer. This is not a time for introverted feelers to reflect upon past events to decide what is personally meaningful for them. No, this is a time for introverted feelers to put plan into action. This is a time for introverted feelers to rotate on their dominant axis and employ extroverted thinking in a convergent manner, thus allowing this type to achieve their goals, thus allowing the type to employ their introverted feeling as an authority function, pushing their agenda forward into the external world in order to accomplish their goals, finish the projects they'd started maybe years ago. Colloquially, you can call it flow. More scientifically, you can just call it a state of prolonged concentration. But this is time to hunker down into what is meaningful to you. And use this time, use this quarantine so many of us are faced with, in order to realize your ideals in reality. And yeah, I get it. Maybe your ideals involve the external world. Maybe so much of what you want to do is restricted by this quarantine. But I'm certain you can accomplish a great deal of these projects that are meaningful to you within the confines of your own home, even if it only amounts to creating a thorough, comprehensive, time-relative plan of exactly, step by step, you're going to accomplish the things that are meaningful to you. But now let's take the extroverted feeling dominance. So oftentimes, these types are engrossed in the external world, putting time and effort into developing their career, putting time and effort into managing the communities that are meaningful to them, putting time and effort into being the person they feel they are expected to be. But in the face of disruption, whereby these sources of work are no longer available to them, whereby extroverted feeling data, such as in the case of a quarantine, is now much more virtual in nature, the extroverted feeling dominant may very well feel at a loss for what to do. They may feel very much helpless. They want to assist society, and yet they're being told to stay indoors. And of course, what is happening right now is not a good thing, and I'm not saying that it is. But what I am saying is you have the opportunity to delve into your opposing stack in a manner which you may not have been able to do so before. Because in the face of disruption, you are suddenly presented with this kind of cognitive equilibrium, whereby the dominant axis between the dominant and opposing function suddenly becomes much more fluid. Suddenly you find yourself able to question what you consider to be logical. Whether you're an ESFJ, introverted sensing divergent auxiliary, or an ENFJ, introverted intuition divergent auxiliary, you are nonetheless able to assess whether precisely or plethorically your introverted thinking frameworks, that which you may have so rigidly operated under beforehand, your understanding of what constitutes normality, of what constitutes acceptability within society, your understanding of the truth, your understanding of what is meaningful, what is beneficial to the human race. In the face of a quarantine, you no longer have access to other people to tell you how things are, to tell you what is acceptable, what rules are reality operating under. No, this is the time to flip on your axis and form your own original theories, not just to research what other people are saying, not just to look onto various tutorials or lectures on the internet. No, dig deep into your own introverted thinking frameworks, form your own view, make connections, use your auxiliary to your introverted thinking, be it introverted sensing in the case of the ESFJ or introverted intuition in the case of the ENFJ, to come up with your own original frameworks of reality, to further refine and develop your skill sets in a manner unique to you. So that means when normality does return, you can contribute to society, fulfill a niche on a level that you could not before. It is time for you to develop your introverted thinking individuality and dip into your extroverted codex as necessary. Converse with people your new original ideas. Put pen to paper, form diagrams. But at the core, this is an opportunity for you to really, in a convergent manner, come to grips with your otherwise divergent introverted thinking function. And finally, let's visit the introverted thinking dominants, the ISTP and the INTP. It is time for these types to come out of their own heads, to stop frameworking everything, to rotate on their dominant axis in order to employ extroverted feeling in a convergent manner. Because so oftentimes, this oppositional extroverted feeling type will have a wide circle of acquaintances. They'll often have highly well-developed social skills. They'll often be very verbose, whether in real life or perhaps on a YouTube comment section whereby they're having mutually beneficial, rational discussions with other people. But so oftentimes there'll be a kind of wall up between them and the person they're talking to. So oftentimes there's a kind of emotional barrier. But it is in the face of this disruption that presents an opportunity, although we are very much, many of us, limited to the confines of the virtual world, to perhaps take one of these many acquaintances and forge a few genuine friendships. Allow other people to emotionally influence you. Allow yourself to emotionally influence other people. Because rational discourse is fantastic. I love introverted thinking. I love exchanging different viewpoints with other people. I love the discussions I get to have in the comment section of my videos. And many of the people I do have excellent discussions with are introverted thinking dominants. And many of the people I see interact with each other in the comment section of my YouTube videos are, again, introverted thinking dominants. It's quite clear. A lot of them are INTPs, for example. In the face of this disruption, it is time for the INTP and the ISTP to activate their amazing networking potential, but on a level that goes beyond just superficial niceties, on a level that goes beyond exchanging valuable rational information and simple pragmatism. No, it is time for you to expand the confines of your true core social circles, of your friends. I've no doubt many introverted thinking dominants watching this video will have an excellent social circle. What I'm urging you to do is expand your circle of friends, your circle of people who you're willing to engage with on a deep emotional level. Because it is in forming these deeper relationships, these deeper friendships, that will expand your networking potential even further. Developing the option to forge a genuine friendship from an acquaintance. Letting go of the fear you may very naturally be experiencing when faced with the possibility of a friendship. What is this person's agenda? What is their ulterior motive? Can I trust them? These are all valid concerns, but it is through the rotation of your dominant axis and employment of extroverted feeling that allows that fear to be optional and allows you, should you so wish, to forge new and genuine relationships with other people. And yeah, for the meantime, many of us are in quarantine. Your employment of this function may very well be limited to the abstract virtual world. But we happen to live in a society where the abstract and virtual so oftentimes has physical ramifications. The people you befriend online are real people, and they can physically impact your world for the better. And that concludes the video. So I know a lot of us are faced with a lot of uncertainty and anxiety at the moment, and this video is not to say in any way, shape or form what is happening to anybody is a good thing. What is happening across the world is a good thing. But we do have a certain amount of freedom in the way that we can react to it. And when confined to our own home quarters, such as in the case of a quarantine, which is happening at the moment in the UK, this does very much present an opportunity from a cognitive stack perspective. When you combine a disruption to a person's everyday lifestyle with the sudden confinement of physical reality to a small space, such as a home, you are effectively allowing a person to focus on certain cognitive functions that they may not previously have been able to do so for extended periods of time. And it is due to this disruption that I myself can spend much more time engaged with the concrete, tangible world than I could previously. And as such, I'm putting much more work now into both CPT and my musical endeavours than I have in a long, long time. And I'm willing to put this amount of extra effort into developing CPT even further because I believe in it. I believe in a system's capacity to help people. I believe in a system's capacity to be used as a highly effective self-referencing and self-development tool. Whether it's in the successful completion of projects that are meaningful to you, whether it's in the formation of new friendships and relationships, and whether it's a comprehensive multi-nuanced personality system that can chart individual variation down to the decimal point, whereby every single person is recognized as the individual they are, and every single differing style of cognition can be understood in an objective, rational manner. So yeah, these are troubling times we find ourselves in. I hope the video is useful, and of course, the advice I do give to specific types still applies to some extent to all types, because ultimately we must activate all our cognitive functions in all possible manners and orientations in order to fully realize our cognitive type and our own ability. But I do hope the advice I imparted in this video was helpful to some people. And again, this is a bad situation, and all I want to do here is present a potential silver lining for people who have the freedom and the capacity to take advantage of it. And hopefully in the midst of this disruption and insecurity, I can continue putting out high quality CPT videos. And just to anyone who's uncertain about what type they are, I do have a multi-tier type service available, and you can check out more information on that on my website. So thank you so much for watching. Definitely make sure to leave a like in the video if you found it useful. And if you haven't already done so, make sure to click that subscribe button with the bell icon next to it to stay notified of future content. I upload a video every single week. So I really hope you're all doing well, and I'll be back same place, same time next week. For now, take care of yourself.